Hi, it's Future from Sewmate. Welcome to my channel. I'm going to be showing you how to make this beautiful crop jacket with page pockets from scratch. I will be showing you both the pattern making and the sewing part as well, so be sure to stick around to the end. You will need a basic jacket block to do this. I'll leave a link in the description below. Now starting with the back jacket, press around your block as usual, making sure to mark all the notches and the dart. Lift your block, draw in your dart, square in your waistline. Now from the waistline, draw a 5 cm wide band and square a line across. Choose anywhere along the armhole and square a line across for your yoke line. Now square a line up through the dart point. We're going to be ignoring the dart in this pattern. Square a line up and square a line across like I've just done. Now join this top part to the armhole like I'm doing. Now adding a seam allowance to our band, which is 1 cm. Make sure it's squared, ignoring the dart as well in this pattern. Now we've got a seam allowance at the center back like I've shown you here. We're going to outline it and take it off our pattern because all the back pieces are going to be on fold. So all these 3 pieces are going to be on fold. Now labeling my pattern pieces: back yoke, cut 1 on fold, and I put my initial. Center back panel, cut 1 on fold, and I put my initial. Side back panel, cut 1 pair, and I put my initial. Back waistband, cut 2 on fold, and I put my initial. So we're going to be cutting through this line, and this line. Adding my grain lines to all the pattern pieces parallel to the center back. And adding my joining notches, double notches for the back. Now cut around your pattern pieces. Next, we're going to be adding joining seam allowances to all the pattern pieces like I'm doing here, and moving the notches across to the edge with all the pattern pieces. Now starting with the back yoke, add your 1 cm seam allowance and move notches across and cut around the pattern piece. Next, the center back panel. Add your seam allowances right round 1 cm. And cut around your pattern. Side back panel, cut around the pattern as well. Center back panel, all our back pattern pieces are finished. Now we're moving on to the front. Get your front jacket block and trace around the block as usual, making sure to mark all the notches and the dots. Lift your block, draw in your dart, square in your waistline and your hemline, square in the underarm line, and we're going to add a 5 cm wide bend like we did with the front again, and square a line up. Next, join the top point to the underarm with a straight line. Now coming to the center front, we're going to add a button extension of 2.5 cm because that's my button size I'm gonna be using there. Then I'm going to add a seam allowance of 1 cm after it. Square line across like I'm doing here. Next, square yourself a guideline up through the dart tip. This is going to help us position our pocket for the jacket. So our pocket is going to be 11 cm wide and 13 cm long. Just put half the pocket width on each side of the guideline. Now measure to the middle of the pocket, go down by 2 cm and connect back to the points like I've done here. Do the same with the pocket flap. Now adding seam allowances right round the pocket 1 cm and above the pocket flap 1 cm as well. Now I'm drawing in my panel lines. You can just draw to before the bend actually, and ignoring the dart as well like we did with the back pattern, adding a seam allowance for our bend there, 1 cm. And labeling my panels, panel 1, panel 2 and panel 3. So I'm gonna cut 1 pair for the first panel and cut 1 pair for the second and cut 1 pair as well for the third panel. And labeling the front waistband, cut 2 pairs and I put my initial. Labeling the front yoke, cut 1 pair. Now onto my front facing. We're just going to measure in 8 cm from the last line we drawn, which is our seam allowance, and draw 2 guidelines there and just draw a straight line. Go in 8 cm at the shoulder again and square a line down. Now follow through the neckline edge, drawing in 8 cm all the way like I'm doing here. Get a curved ruler and draw a nice curve like I'm doing here. So we won't need this part. Make sure your facing is going to go 1 cm into the bend like I've done here. Now I'm tracing my facing piece with my tracing wheel. And cutting around the pattern to get the facing pattern, following through the tracing wheel marks that are there already. And labeling the pattern piece, jacket facing, cut 1 pair plus 1 pair fusing, and drawing in my grain line parallel to the center front, and our facing piece is finished. Now we're finishing off our pocket. Now adding our punches 3 mm inside each point. This will help us in positioning our pocket when it comes to sewing. Get a fresh pattern paper and put it under your pocket and trace around your pocket flap first. Then move your paper and trace around your pocket like I'm doing here. Now remove your pattern, and I'm just outlining my pocket here because I still need to add the facing. So I'm just gonna add 3 centimeters above it, because we already have the 1 centimeter that we added for our pocket flap. Now adding my grain lines to both the pocket and the pocket flap piece. Now labeling my pocket piece, page pocket, cut 1 pair, and I put my initial. And labeling my pocket flap, cut 2 pairs, and I put my initial. Cut around your pattern pieces for both the page pocket and the pocket flap. Then cut around all your pattern pieces. Adding joining notches and continue cutting. Now adding joining seam allowances 1 centimeter to all my pattern pieces, starting with the front yoke. Then to the front bend piece, add 1 centimeter and cut around the pattern. Then panel 3, panel 2, and panel 1. Add all the joining seam allowances 1 centimeter and transfer your notches across to the edge and cutting around your pattern pieces. And adding notches to help position the pocket flap. And our front pieces are finished. Now we're moving on to the sleeve. We're going to be using our 2-piece jacket sleeve, so trace around your upper sleeve and your under sleeve, making sure to mark all the notches. Lift your blocks, draw in your elbow lines and your grain lines, and draw in your hemline as well. From the hemline, we're gonna go up by 5 centimeters and draw a straight line. This is going to be for our sleeve bend for both the upper sleeve and the under sleeve, and we're going to add a joining seam allowance at the bottom of our bend for 1 centimeter. Now we're going to outline our seam allowances at the front part of our sleeves on the bend section, which is 1 centimeter for me. Coming to the sleeve head, we're going to come down by 1.5 centimeters and square a straight line. We're going to reduce the ease on the sleeve head there. Get your upper sleeve back and it will help you to redraw the sleeve head, moving it from side to side like I'm doing here with your owl. Remove your block. So this is no longer part of our sleeve. Now we're going to extend out at the outer part of our sleeve and make sure that we square a line down for our sleeve bends. Extend the line to the seam allowance. And labeling our pattern pieces, jacket upper sleeve, cut 1 pair, and I put my initial. Jacket under sleeve, cut 1 pair, and I put my initial. So we're going to overlap these 2 parts of our seam allowance and adding double notches there for our back bend. Cutting around all our pattern pieces, starting with the sleeve bends. Now overlap these two pattern pieces at the seam allowances. Tap everything down. Then we're going to add a joining seam allowance at the top, 1 centimeter. And labeling the pattern piece, sleeve cuff, cut 2 pairs, and I put my initial. And cutting around the pattern. Now adding a crane line to our pattern piece. And we're also going to add 1 pair of fusing. Now cut around your pattern pieces like I'm doing here. And adding joining seam allowances at the sleeve hems there, 1 centimeter. And cut around the patterns. And our sleeve patterns are finished. We're going to be using a 1-piece convertible collar pattern for this jacket. I'll leave a link in the description below and a link above as well. And all our pattern pieces are finished. Now we're moving on to sewing. Moving on to sewing our jacket, what you need are your completed patterns, your fabric, buttons, and your usual cutting tools. So for the fabric, I'm using this beautiful corduroy fabric. Next, we're going to move on to cutting our fabrics. Now all our pieces are cut and ready to sew, so the first step is for us to go ahead and interface all the pieces that need interfacing. So that's the waistband pieces, the sleeve cuff pieces, the facing, and our collar piece. I've gone ahead and interfaced all my pieces already to save time. So now we're going to put all this on the side for now. So first get your collar piece. We're going to fold it halfway lengthwise, right sides facing like this. And we're going to pin along the edges here. So we'll take this to the sewing machine and sew along the sides here with a 1 centimeter seam allowance. And I'm gonna put this on the side for now. Get your center back piece. Lay it on the table with the right side facing up. Then get your side back panels and we're going to lay them on top of the center back panel, right sides facing, matching our notches. And pin along the panel lines. So we'll take this to the sewing machine and sew along the panel lines and overlock them. I'm gonna put this on the side too. Next, we're going to get our front panels, panel 1, panel 2, and panel 3. And we've got 2 sets of each, so we're going to pin them together along the panel lines. So get panel 2 first. Then panel 1. Lay it on top of it with the right side facing, and we're going to pin along this way. And get 1 set of panel 3 and we're going to lay it on top of this panel line with the right sides facing. And pin along this side as well. Now repeat same for the other sets. So we'll take this to the sewing machine and sew along the panel lines and overlock them. Make sure you've got a pair of each like this, okay? We'll put this on the side. Next, get your pocket pieces, the pocket flaps and the patch pockets. So for the flaps, we've got 2 pairs of each. Lay them on the table with the right sides facing. Now pin them along right round, like that for both pieces. We'll take this to the sewing machine and we're going to sew right round with a 1 centimeter seam allowance, okay? So with the patch pockets, we're going to go ahead and overlock right round first. Then we're going to flip over the facing, which is 4 centimeters at the top there. Flip it back like this, and we're going to sew here with a 1 centimeter seam allowance. And here as well, 1 centimeter seam allowance just up to there. So now we're gonna go to the sewing machine and do all these steps at once, and I'll be back here soon. Okay, so we've sewn all those steps that we talked about. Now get your pocket flaps, and we're just going to trim the corners and turn them to the right side. Now take these to the iron and iron them nice and flat, and then we'll take them back to the sewing machine and do a top stitching, which is 0.5 centimeters or 5 millimeters. Okay, so I'll put this on the side for now. Then get your pocket pieces. So we've sewn them like this. So now we're going to trim the corners as well and turn them to the right side. Now we're gonna take this to the iron and we're going to iron them nice and flat as well, ironing down our seam allowances of 1 centimeter right round like this. 1 centimeter right round. Then we're gonna take this to the sewing machine as well and give them a top stitching of 5 millimeters or 0.5 centimeters right round from the forward line all the way round to the forward line. Okay, we'll put this on the side as well. Then we're gonna get our back piece and we're going to go ahead to the iron and iron our seams nice and flat. We're going to iron these seam allowances towards the center back, that is, iron them towards the inside like this. And then we're gonna go to the sewing machine again and we're going to top stitch on top of our seam allowance 0.5 centimeters for both sides. Okay, I'm putting this on the side. Then getting our 2 front pieces, we're gonna do the same as what we did with the back. Take them to the iron the seams towards the middle like this, and we're going to go ahead and top stitch all of them 0.5 centimeters for both pieces. Okay, then with our collar, we're going to trim the corners here and turn the collar to the right side. So take this to the iron as well and iron it nice and flat. Then we'll take it to the sewing machine and give it a top stitching as well, which is 5 millimeters or 0.5 centimeters right round from the edge here to the corner. Pivot our fabric, go all the way towards the top edge, pivot your fabric here again and come down here with a 0.5 centimeters seam allowance. Let's do all those stages and then we'll be back. Okay, now so we've done all those steps, ironed everything nice and flat and top stitched everything. Okay, pocket pieces, collar, the pocket pieces, the patch pockets. So this is 3.5 centimeters seam allowance. Remember our facing is 4 centimeters. And the top stitching as well. And our back piece. Ironed and sewn on nicely. Okay. So next we're gonna get our back piece, lay it on the table with the right side facing up. Then get your back yoke and we're going to lay it on top of this piece, right sides facing like this. Pin along this edge, matching all your notches. Now we're gonna take this to the sewing machine and sew along this seam with a 1 centimeter seam allowance. When we finish that, we're going to overlock the whole seam. Then we'll take it to the iron our seam facing up like this. Then we'll take it to the sewing machine again, and we're going to give it a top stitching at the top here, 5 millimeters or 0.5 centimeters. Okay, I'm gonna put this on the side. Now get your front pieces and lay them on the table with the right side facing up like this. Then take both your pocket flaps and we're going to put them on here using the notches that we have on our pattern. Just put them down. Now go ahead and get your front yokes and just lay them on top of this piece, right sides facing like this. Make sure nothing moves. And we're going to pin all these 3 layers together for both pieces. Now we're gonna take this to the sewing machine as well, and we're going to sew along this seam here. When we finish that, we're going to overlock both, and then we're going to go to the iron and we're going to iron our seam facing up. After that, we'll take it to the sewing machine again, turn it over to the right side, and we're going to go ahead and give it a top stitching at 5 millimeters or 0.5 centimeters. Let's do that for both. Okay, now so that's done. We finished sewing on our seams here and top stitching everything, and we also sewn on our pocket flaps. So with our front pieces facing up like this, we're gonna get both our pocket pieces, and we're going to first pin the pocket flap up just to get it out of the way, and then we're going to position our pockets, pin them along. So we're gonna take these two to the sewing machine and go and do an edge stitching 2 millimeters from the edge right round. Okay, let's go and do that. Okay, now we've finished attaching our pockets. They're looking all nice and neat now. So next we're going to get our back piece, lay it on the table with the right side facing up, get both the front pieces and lay them down with the wrong side facing up. So put them right side facing down like this. Now we're gonna go ahead and pin along the side seams and the shoulder seams. So we're gonna take this to the sewing machine and sew along the side seams and the shoulder seams with a 1.5 centimeter seam allowance. So I'm gonna put this on the side. So now we're gonna take our waistband pieces and we're going to take the front pieces and lay them on top of the back pieces, right sides facing. Pin along the edges. So we'll take this to the sewing machine and sew along the side seams here with a 1.5 centimeter seam allowance for both. Okay. Get your two facing pieces and take them to your overlocker and just overlock along this edge here. So now we're gonna go to the sewing machine and do all those steps now. Okay, now so that's done. Next we're going to pin on our facing pieces to the front jacket, right side facing. So just pin along this edge here. Now just go to the sewing machine and sew along this seam here with a 1 centimeter seam allowance. When we finish, we're going to understitch this seam. So just go ahead and lift your facing piece, roll it on top of the seam, and we're just going to stitch on top of it here from the neckline all the way down. Okay, and we're going to take our waistband pieces I went ahead and ironed the seams open like this. So just put them on the table, right side facing, and we're going to pin along one edge. So we're just going to go ahead and sew from one end to the other, okay, with a 1 centimeter seam allowance. Let's go and do that. Okay, now, so we've done that. We've sewn on our facing pieces and we understitched everything down, and I went ahead and ironed it in like this, looking nice and neat. Now for the waistband piece, I went ahead and joined the bottom edge all the way, and then I took it to the iron and ironed it halfway lengthwise to the right side like this, and I also went ahead and ironed under my seam allowance for the other edge. Okay, so I'm gonna put this on the side for now. With your jacket right side facing up, get your collar piece, and we're going to start aligning it from the center front notch all the way to the other center front notch. Pin it down. Next, we're going to get our facing edge and we're going to fold along this seam here, fold back onto the collar. And pin along. Make sure you pin all the 3 layers together now. Now make sure that you fold the edge of our facing here to the inside by 1.5 centimeters. And just pin it down. Repeat the same to this side as well. Now, as you can see, we don't have a back facing here for our jacket. So what we're going to do is to get hold of one layer of our collar piece, and we're just going to snip here for about 1.2 millimeters, which is your seam allowance plus about 2 millimeters, okay? Now what we're going to do is just to pin one layer of our collar to the jacket. Now get hold of the upper piece that we snipped, and we're going to pin it back so that we don't catch it when we are sewing. So now we're going to take this to the sewing machine and sew from one edge to the other, okay, with a 1 centimeter seam allowance. Let's go and do that. Okay, now, so we've done that. We've sewn from one end to the other, and we're going to get these pins off. Clip the corners and turn everything nicely to the right side. Okay, now so our collar is looking nice and neat here, and in the inside it looks like this. So next we're going to go ahead and clip our seam allowance just here where we folded our facing on both sides. Make sure you don't go past the stitching there. Okay, now we'll take this to the iron, and we're going to go ahead and iron this part of our seam up like this. At the same time, ironing our seam allowance down like this so that we can cover that seam. Now go ahead and take it to the sewing machine and give it an edge stitching from this notch to the other notch, okay? So when we finish with that, we're going to go ahead and grab the facing piece. Make sure everything is lying nice and neat. Put it on top of the seam like that, of the shoulder seam. Now from the inside, we're going to hold our facing, the folded part, together with the seam allowance. So this is the shoulder seam allowance, and this is our folded facing piece. So we're actually grabbing the inside of our facing piece together with the seam allowance like this from the inside, okay? Then we're going to go to our sewing machine and just give it a bit of a stitching here, just the two things together, Okay, do the same on the other side. Let's go and do that. Okay, now so we finished sewing on our collar. We did an edge stitching here, and it looks like this at the back. Okay, so now with our jacket, right side facing up like this, we're gonna get our waistband piece, and we'll take the unfolded side and we're going to put it onto our jacket, leaving the seam allowance hanging, which is 1 centimeter, and we're going to pin along the whole edge, matching our notches and matching our seams as well. Okay, now we're going to go ahead, take this to the sewing machine and sew from one end to the other. Make sure to leave your 1 centimeter hanging at the edge here. Okay, and also make sure that your facing is nice and flat inside the jacket. Let's go and do that now. Okay, now so we've sewn this seam here for the waistband onto the jacket, and I went ahead and ironed this seam flat facing downwards so that at the end I'll be able to cover it with the waistband like this. Okay, so what we're going to do next is to go to the ends of our waistband, and we're going to go ahead and fold it along the fold line here, along this seam, fold it back, and we're going to go ahead, pin it down. Now take this to the sewing machine, and we're going to be sewing from the fold line all the way to the end of our waistband here. Make sure that it's folded up like this. Okay, the seam is folded up. So sew from the fold line all the way to the folded line of our seam here as well. Okay, back taking at the beginning and end, and it's a 1 centimeter seam allowance for me. Okay, do that for both sides. Okay, now so next we're going to clip the corners and turn the waistband to the right side. So next we're just going to match our side seams here with the seam allowance folded under, and pin everything down. Now pin along the whole waistband. Now take this to the sewing machine and edge stitch around the whole waistband. Let's go and do that. Okay, now so the waistband is finished and it's looking nice and neat. So we're just going to put this on the side for now, and we're going to start working on our sleeves. Now get your sleeve cuffs. We've got 2 pairs of each, and we're going to go ahead and put them one on top of the other, right side facing, like this. And we're going to go ahead and pin along the bottom edge for both. So we take this to the sewing machine and join the bottom edges with a straight stitch with a 1 centimeter seam allowance from one end to the other for both pieces. I'm gonna put this on the side. Now get your upper sleeves and under sleeves, and we're going to lay the under sleeves on top of the upper sleeves, right sides facing, making sure to match our notches. Remember, we've got double notches and single notches for our sleeves. Let's match those ones. Now go ahead and pin along the edge with a single notch, which is the front of our sleeve. Okay, let's do that for both. Now we're gonna go to the sewing machine and sew along this seam here with a 1 centimeter seam allowance and overlock it. And then for the back part of our sleeve, we're going to go ahead and overlock it open like this. Overlock both ends for both sleeves. Let's go and do that. Okay, so we've done that, and with the sleeve cuffs I went ahead and ironed them nice and flat to the right side, just like we did with the waistband. It's exactly the same method, and I ironed under 1 seam allowance for both. Okay, I'm just going to put this on the side for now. Now get your 2 sleeve pieces So we're going to go ahead and turn them to the wrong side like this, aligning these two seams. We're going to be leaving a slit on our sleeve, so we're just going to go about 10 centimeters on this open side that we overlocked, and we're just going to put double pins there. Pin along the rest of the seam. Now take this to the sewing machine and sew from the top here to the double pins and back tack. Sew from the top to the double pins and back tack. Let's go and do that. Okay, now so we closed that seam and ironed it open, and our slit is there. So now we'll take this to the sewing machine and we're just going to sew on our slit. Just sew a straight stitch all the way up, go over to this side and sew all the way down as well. Just 5 millimeters or 0.5 centimeters. Okay, let's do that. Okay, so we've done that. We finished off sewing down our slit, and this is how it looks from the outside. Okay, now get your sleeve cuffs. We're going to get the side that's not turned under, and we're going to start pinning from one end of the slit to the other, making sure to leave our 1 centimeter overlap there for our seam allowance, and pin around the whole sleeve for both. Take this to the sewing machine and we're going to sew with a 1 centimeter seam allowance from one end to the other. When we finish that, we're going to finish off the ends of our sleeve. So just turn it over on itself halfway, like we did with the waistband, and we're just going to sew from the forward line all the way down to the forward line again here with a 1 centimeter seam allowance for all the 4 sides. Okay, let's go and do that. Okay, so we've done that and we're just gonna go ahead and trim the corner and turn the sleeve cuff to the right side. Turn your sleeve to the right side, and now we're going to go ahead and give it a top stitching like we did with the waistband, right round. Okay, I'm gonna do that to both sleeves. So now we finished stitching on our sleeve cuffs and it's looking nice and neat. And so we're going to go ahead and sew on our sleeves to our jacket now. Now get your jackets, lay it on the table with the right side facing up. Now get your sleeves, and we're going to be inserting them through the armhole here, right side facing, and we're going to pin everything up, making sure to match all our notches. Okay, let's do that for both sides. Now take this to the sewing machine and sew around the armhole and overlock it for both sides. Let's do that. Okay, now so we finished sewing on our sleeves. So the final step is for us to sew on our buttons and buttonholes. So for ladies jackets, it's right over left. Okay, so what that means is that our buttonholes are going to be on the right side and our buttons on the left side. Okay, and then for the buttons, the first one is going to come up here, and then I'll have one in the middle and the last one on the band. Okay, and for the sleeves I'll just put one each. Okay, let's go and do that. Okay, now so we finished sewing on our buttons and buttonholes for both the front jacket and the sleeves, and I also went ahead and ironed everything down nicely, and I ironed my collar as well. It's looking nice and neat. Okay, and my jacket is finished. Thank you.